Blessed All Saints Day, everybody, and Tony here with my review of Mozart's Die Zauberflöte with once again conductor Dominic Limburg, which I saw at the Deutsche Oper Berlin. This marks the third time I saw Günther Kremer's production of Mozart's Die Zauberflöte at the Deutsche Oper Berlin because I wanted to see and hear Lilit Davtyan perform the role of Pamina. But before I get to Miss Davtyan, a few words about Hye-Young who returned as the Queen of the Night. I mentioned 6 months ago that while I thought Miss Moon was vocally adept as well as vocally agile for the Queen of the Night, I thought that she didn't really have the correct dramatic coloratura soprano size to fit this role, simply because Hye-Young is a lyric coloratura soprano, and I thought that she was better here, although I am still not thoroughly convinced of her vocal size to fit this role. She would actually be more adept at singing roles like Olympia, Zerbinetta, Aminta from Die Schweigsame Frau, Gilda from Rigoletto, Oscar from Un ballo in Maschera, Blondchen from Die Entführung aus dem Serail, Rosina from Barbier de Sevilla, Marie from La Fille du Régiment, Philine from Ambroise Thomas Mignon, Ophélie from Thomas Hamlet, and the title role of Stravinsky's The Nightingale, not something as dramatic and blazing as the Queen of the Night. Because if you know me, I prefer to hear a real dramatic coloratura soprano, such as Mitza Glavotsevich, Serafima Dineva, Ray Woodland, Colette Laurent, Jutta Fulpius, Margareta Hallen, Christina Deutgom, Christiana Edda Pierre, Rita Shane, Edda Moser, and Ursula Kossuth. Those were voices that I would easily associate with the Queen of the Night, unless they forget about Maria Stada, who was also a very well-known Pamina, but also sang the Queen of the Night, and of course, Chloe Owen. And when it comes to the complete package of dramatic vocalism, size, and agility, I can never go wrong with the likes of Ray Woodland and Christina Deutgom. But if I also want size and fury, Edda Moser was certainly my woman. However, Hye-Young managed to be vocally better than when I first saw her in the role 6 months ago. Her voice did grow in a little bit of clarity, especially where she maintained her fine assets of her high notes, as well as use that icy and charismatic stage presence of hers to make the Queen of the Night her own. Even though I am still not vocally convinced of Hye-Young as the Queen of the Night, I am still going to keep rooting for her in terms of her charisma, as well as how bravely she managed to attack those notes and attack all the coloratura lines very well with everything she's got. And here's also hoping that she continues to develop in the right way and make sure that her voice continues to grow in clarity, not just at the top notes, but also in the lower notes. Therefore, I still have to give my hat off to Hye-Young for doing a serviceable enough job as the Queen of the Night. Now, the main highlight of this review is Lilit Davtyan as Pamina. I was quite curious to see how this young light lyric soprano was going to fare as Princess Pamina. I read her biography and she sang roles ranging from the coloratura soubrette repertoire like Adele from the Fledermaus and Norina from Don Pasquale to more lyrical roles such as Corina from Rossini's Il Viaggio a Rams. And my goodness, did Lilit Davtyan strike a strong first impression on me. First of all, I loved her crystalline, silvery, light lyric soprano voice that sounded girlish, sweet, and beautifully toned all throughout the registers. I also love the way that she was able to coordinate her voice so well, especially when it came to coordinating head voice and chest voice. She was able to sing in coordinated head voice so superbly that I have to give her a lot of kudos for being technically proficient as Pamina. However, while I did find Lilit Davtyan to be vocally adept and technically proficient as Pamina, her voice was a bit too light for this role, and I would have loved for these 3 C's to occur when any soprano sings Pamina. I'm talking about color, charisma, and creaminess. Color in terms of having a lot more flair and dimension for this role, because having a light voice is never enough. Charisma in making Pamina not just girlish, but also a young woman who is growing up and finding out these feelings for Tamino, and of course, how she is quite conflicted with being torn between her mother and Zarastro. So basically, you have to have that torn duty found not only vocally but theatrically, which at least Lilit Davtyan managed to do quite well. But vocally speaking, she could have added a lot more creaminess to the voice, as in that additional body and additional lyricism to make Pamina a great character to root for and a more dimensional character to feel for. Because whenever I think of the great sopranos who sang Pamina, whether they be lyric sopranos or coloratura sopranos, I would easily turn my attention to Elfriede Trötschel, Hilde Guden, Anneliese Rothenberger, Agnes Giebel, Lucina Mara, Wilma Lipp, Melita Museli, Ruth Margret Pütz, Anna Moffo, Lydia Marimpietri, Colette Boki, Valerie Masterson, Edith Mattis, and Ileana Kotrubash, especially where my personal favorite Paminas are concerned, such as Anna Moffo's creamy and agile voice, and Valerie Masterson's sheer vocal beauty, and lest I forget about Annelisa Rothenberger's silvery tone that is not just light and sweet, but also beautifully lyrical. And if we're talking genuine lyric sopranos, I can never ever go wrong, especially with the likes of Lisa de la Casa and Irmgard Siegfried. And I dare not forget about Nadine Connor and Eleanor Stieber. Those lyric sopranos, let alone lyric coloratura sopranos in Anna Moffo's and Colette Boki's cases, had way more color, way more creaminess, and way more charisma, especially where Anna Moffo's creamy and marbly tone is concerned. At least with Lilit Davtyan, yes, she still has a bit of a long way to go in developing her voice properly, but I could already hear a lot of wonderful potential in this young light lyric soprano with a voice that can go the coloratura soprano route, especially with roles such as Leila, Charpentier's Louise, Melisande, Lucia de Lammermoor, Linda de Chamonix, Amina from La Sonnambula, Elvira Valton from I Puritani, Gilda from Rigoletto, Zdenka from Arabella, and maybe in 5 to 10 years' time, Violetta Valeri from Verdi's La Traviata. The possibilities for Miss Lilit Davtyan are absolutely endless because she has proven herself tonight that she was technically proficient. Sure, her voice is a tad bit too light for Pamina and would be more adept for singing Papagena. But despite that, Lilit Davtyan's technical proficiency, absolute vocal beauty, silvery crystalline tone, and her fine technique all managed to make her performance as Pamina absolutely memorable. It also helped that she was able to inhabit this role with sufficient girlishness and, of course, sufficient charm to make her interesting and worth investing in. So I still have to give my hat off to Lilit Davtyan for a fine and superb performance as Pamina. And here's also hoping that she continues to grow and develop in the best way possible. Michot Marrero definitely stole the show once again as Papagena. And this was a role that she has been singing for many years. And of course, a role that she continues to find a lot of colors with, a lot of nuances, and of course, a role that she continues to find a lot of joy in. And that joy is also reflected in not only her singing, which is her signature silvery, light soprano voice that is so full of charisma and so full of charm and absolutely delicious to listen to, but also her stage presence. She is a performer that I can argue knows how to master physical theater. She knows how to work with her body. She knows how to choreograph her moves so well and combine her stage presence and choreographical prowess with a voice that was silvery, a voice that was sweet, and a stage presence that made her even more charismatic. Yes, I know that the memories of Jeanette Scovotti as Papagena, let alone Lisa Otto or Graziella Sciuti, can never ever be diminished unless they forget about another personal favorite of mine, Gertrude Friedman, but Jeanette Scovotti managed to rank on top as my personal favorite Papagena of all time. Nevertheless, Michot Marrero's soubrette charisma and absolute charm as Papagena make her a wonderful sight to behold, and I would even love to see and hear Michot Marrero in other roles such as Lisa from Bellini's La Sonnambula, Musetta from La Bohème, Lisette from Puccini's La Rondine, and even Lauretta from Puccini's Gianni Schicchi, unless they forget about Gilda, Nanetta, and Oscar. The possibilities for Miss Marrero as a fine light soprano / coloratura soprano are absolutely endless, and her support performance as Papagena demonstrated that she managed to steal the show from both Hye-Young Moon's and Lilit Davtyan's feet tonight. So here's also hoping that she continues to emit more charismatic and more charming performances every time she's on stage. The three ladies were also finely sung, with Florina Stucchi's silvery lyric soprano voice as the first lady, Arianna Manganello's creamy lyric mezzo voice being put to fine use as the second lady, and Lauren Decker's mezzo contralto voice, and of course her towering presence making a fine impression as the third lady. And when they are combined together, they manage to make some really fine music all the way with different colors, different tones, and interesting nuances to be found in Florina Stucchi, Arianna Manganello, and Lauren Decker. Lest I forget about the three boys sung by the soloists of the Kinderchorus der Deutschen Oper Berlin. Their voices blended heavenly, and their charm as singers also reflected in the way they were able to play their roles so well. So bravi to these fine young boys who managed to make fine music of the three boys. Chance-Jonas O'Toole managed to be audible as he was able to sing over that orchestra quite well, but there were times I felt like his voice was a tad bit too light for the first armed man, and I would have loved to have a more spinto tenor voice to sing this part, a la Herbert Schochschneider and James King, and lest I forget about the young Anton der Motta, although he was a very well-known Tamino. And lest I forget about Peter Hoffmann, in which I would also argue that the first armed man is another fine role that he did, but Chance-Jonas O'Toole does have a lot of potential to keep on growing as a lyric tenor. He just needs to make sure that he develops his core well and make sure that he covers his notes with everything that he's got. Because as it sounded tonight, yes, his lyric tenor voice was present. It was present enough to sing over the orchestra, but he could use a little bit more body, a little bit more covered chest tones, and way more virility in his voice, because there is a lot of potential in Mr. O'Toole to keep on doing well with every engagement that he finds himself in. Philip Yekel stroke again as Papageno, and he was just as charismatic and charming as ever. Interestingly enough, before he sang Ein Mädchen oder Weibchen in the second half of the opera, he also had a little bit of a conversation with Dominic Limburg, the rest of the orchestra, and all of us, the audience, and announced that there was an orchestra member about to retire after 30 years of service and 30 years of artistry. He mentioned that Stefan was about to retire, and I can only wish Stefan a lot of good fortune and fruitfulness in his retirement. Now back to Philip Yekel. Vocally speaking, he was still serviceable, but more than anything, his stage presence, his charisma, his comic timing, and how he was able to carry himself as a singing actor remain unparalleled. Yes, his vocal flaws include not sounding dark enough like a proper baritone, not having enough squealo to make his voice more present, and sounding a little bit too tenorish for Papageno, because who I have in my ears as Papageno are the likes of Erich Kunz, Gerhard Hüsch, Hermann Prey, and my number one all-time favorite being Willy Domgraf Fassbender. And lest I forget about Giuseppe Taddei and Vladimiro Ganzarolli, who had twice as much squillo as those aforementioned baritones and had way more depth and way more richness as Papageno. And especially where the rest of the baritones are concerned, those were real, virile voices that could still be charismatic, that could still be charming to listen to, because of the completeness that they have in their technique. With Philip Yekel, yes, he did resort to singing rather throatily, but I will keep on encouraging him to use a lot more squealo and a lot more vocal heft to make his baritone voice shine and just burst with more charisma and more virility. Vocal flaws aside, I could still give credit to Philip Yekel's charismatic stage presence and for owning the role of Papageno in a theatrical sense. Kieran Carell managed to be way better than he was 6 months ago, and his performance as Tamino shone with way more charisma and a lot more charm. Yes, I am still not so crazy about his nasality, but vocally speaking, I could kind of forgive that nasality because it was slowly diminishing and his voice sounded way more present than it did 6 months ago and sounded slightly clearer when I heard him sing. He was able to have slightly more colors in his voice, a little bit more nuance, but the problem that still held Kieran Carell back from being a great singer was his nasality, and I encourage him to keep on singing more pharyngally. Just get rid of that mask singing for good and for all. Just commit to pharyngeal singing, commit to true chiaroscuro singing, because that is where the real money is. And in terms of my favorite singers of Tamino, just give me real tenor voices such as Koloman von Pataki, Helgeros Wenge, Richard Tauber, Anton der Mota, Walter Ludwig, Ernst Häfliger, Nikolai Gedda, Fritz Wunderlich, who I argue is my number one all-time favorite Tamino, and even the likes of Siegfried Jerusalem and Peter Hoffmann before they had a go at roles like Lohengrin, Sigmund, and Siegfried in Jerusalem's case. Because when I think about Peter Hoffmann and Siegfried Jerusalem, they were natural lyric/pinto tenor voices that made them better for singing Tamino. In fact, all these tenors, whether they be lyric tenors or spinto tenors, had wonderfully complete voices to make Tamino come alive, especially where Fritz Wunderlich's superb use of breath and clarity of tone are concerned. With Kieran Carell, yes, he still does have a long way to go in terms of mastering true, clear, chiaroscuro singing, eliminating nasality, as well as singing more pharyngally. But I'm sure that with way more encouragement to just get rid of that nasality and sing more pharyngally, I can see his light lyric tenor voice continue to shine. At least he still managed to act the part well with sufficient boyishness and sufficient charm. So those were the aspects that definitely saved Kieran Carell's overall performances. I just encourage him to keep on developing his pharyngeal and chiaroscuro singing a lot more, sing with way more covered chest tones, and just eliminate masky nasal singing altogether. Jörg Schörner continues to be as charismatic and charming as he was as the second priest, and his chemistry with Philip Jekas Papageno was still so fun to watch. Burkhard Ulrich continues to be as charismatic as Monostatos, but there were occasions where he kind of gave into whispering, but I could kind of forgive that because Burkhard Ulrich managed to be a fine singing actor as Monostatos. Yes, I still miss that additional clarity to be found in Friedrich Lenz and Erwin Wolfert, but Burkhard Ulrich was a fine singing actor as Monostatos. He was still able to do a fine job in making this character come alive both vocally and theatrically, and he was still able to sing pretty well and use his character tenor voice to make this more come to life. Tobias Kira continues to steal the show as Sarastro. Yes, there were occasions where he sounded a little bit throatier than when I saw and heard him in the role 6 months ago, but I could forgive all that because Tobias Kira was still a strong, sturdy, and handsome basso cantante singing Sarastro, and his tall and elegant stage presence also helped in making this role continually as strong as ever. And while I can never forget the likes of Karl Ridderbusch or Martti Talvela, who had real cavernous voices as Sarastro, I can continue to give my hat off to Tobias Kira for his superb vocal acting as Sarastro. Gerard Ferreras managed to do a fine job as the second arm man, and while his voice isn't as earthquakingly awesome and round and rich such as Martti Talvela or even to some extent Herman Ude, who had way more dimension and way more nuance in his singing of the second arm man, I could still give Gerard Ferreras a lot of credit for what he was able to accomplish with his basso voice, with a lot of growth to be found, and of course a great future to hear Gerard Ferreras in more basso cantante parts from Don Giovanni to Mephistopheles. The future is definitely bright for Mr. Ferreras. Joel Allison's vocal prowess surprised me when he sang The Speaker. I didn't hear any throatiness in his voice. I didn't hear any caprino. I didn't hear any vocal faults compared to when he performed the role of Paolo Albiani about 8 months ago. Those vocal problems were pretty much eliminated when he sang The Speaker. It was a warm, round, rich bass baritone voice that was so listenable, so audible, and had sufficient virility to make the speaker come to life. Yes, I still love Hans Hotter and Franz Krass as my personal favorite speakers, but Joel Allison's fine musicianship and his great development as a singer certainly shone tonight when he sang the role of the speaker, and I have to give him a lot of kudos for what he was able to accomplish vocally and dramatically. Pork Rowan continues to be a sturdy singing actor as the first priest, and his vocal prowess in his bass baritone voice was still as fine as ever. I didn't hear any vocal faults that would have held him back. It was quite clear to listen to, and he definitely gained in a lot more clarity than when I first heard him in roles such as Pietro and the sacristan from Simon Boccanegra and Tosca respectively. So he definitely grew into his element as a bass baritone. So overall, the singing was quite good, all things considered, especially where the likes of Lilit Davtyan and Michot Marrero stole the show from everybody's feet and not just the ladies' feet. With Lilit Davtyan's charmingly sung Pamina, even though it's a tad bit too light for the role, she was able to use her silvery crystalline voice to make Pamina come to life. And Michot Marrero's charm, charisma, and great skills in physical acting managed to make her portrayal of Papagena very laudable and absolutely wonderful to listen to, let alone watch. And among the men, Tobias Kira, even though he sounded slightly under the weather than he was 6 months ago, he was still a strong performer all the way through, complete with his basso cantante voice to make the best out of Sarastro's music. So he definitely deserved all the praise I can give him. I also have to commend Philip Yekal and Kieran Carell for also growing really well as Papageno and Tamino respectively. While I'm not a major fan of their voices for these roles, I could still give them a good number of kudos for developing the right way and rather incrementally as their respective roles. When all is said and done, the singers definitely gave respectable efforts all the way through. The conducting done by Dominic Limburg is not something that I'm still crazy about. There were times that he still lacked a lot more nuance. He still lacked a little bit more color in his conducting. There were times that he let the brass play on a little bit too loudly, and there were times that he still sounded rather imbalanced when he was conducting the orchestra of the Deutsche Oper Berlin. Yes, there were occasions where the fast speed was quite ideal for Der Höllerache or Ein Mädchen oder Weibchen or even Nur Stille Stille. However, that fast speed is completely underwhelming when it came to the overture that could have benefited from a lot more build-up, and even Tamino's portrait aria that could have used a little bit more lento and less rapido, because that would have made for a finer orchestral performance and to even bring out more colors in Kieran Carell's vocal performance. At least Dominic Limburg managed to keep everybody together, and what more can you expect from the chorus and the orchestra of the Deutsche Oper Berlin? They were all reliable to a T. Overall, Lilit Davtyan struck a strong performance on me as Pamina. Vocally speaking, she was clear, she sounded absolutely lovely tonight, and she has a great future ahead of her. Whether I would love to see her as Leila, Louise, Lucia, or even Melisande one day, there is no shadow of a doubt that Lilit Davtyan's light lyric / coloratura soprano voice made a fine first impression on me. Yes, it could have benefited from a lot more color, charisma, and creaminess, a la my favorite Paminas such as Anna Moffo and Edith Mattes, unless they forget about Valerie Masterson. But regardless of whatever was holding her back, I still give a lot of kudos to Lilit Davtyan for singing the role of Pamina with everything that she's got and with great coordination to boot. And for those of you who caught this performance of Mozart's Die Zauberflöte at the Deutsche Oper Berlin, what'd you think of it? Did you feel that Lilit Davtyan stole the show as Pamina? Did you also feel that Michot Marrero was just as strong as a singer as Papagena? Was there another singer who stole their thunder, whether it be from Lilit Davtyan as Pamina or Michot Marrero as Papagena? Or did you feel like the singing was not really to your liking? Please comment below and let me know. Well, that's it for my review of Mozart's Die Zauberflöte starring Lilit Davtyan as Pamina. Tune in tomorrow for my review of Wagner's Der Fliegende Holländer starring Elisabeth Teige as Zenta. So until then, good night everybody.